Jack Harrison, The Scourge of Culverdale High, Chapter 2. The next day, Jack and his friends decided to visit Brighton and had a wonderful time, especially as they managed to get there free by skipping the buses. Whilst in the seaside town, they also plotted revenge against their enemies when they returned to school, and by forming the gang, Jack was no longer a loner, for he saw his friends outside school, although he had just a few and still visited the local common at weekends alone. "I vote we set them up," declared Jack gleefully. "They'll all end up being thrashed by old Burbage, and it will serve them right." The question was, how would they be able to do it? They would have to be very careful and cover their tracks, or else they would end up being caned by the deputy head. Returning home, Jack and his friends went their separate ways at the bus station, and each returned home quite happy after their free day out. It was August the 25th, and the autumn term will be starting within days, so Jack had to decide what he was going to do about taking revenge on his enemies pretty quickly. He couldn't sleep that night, his mind going over and over the problem as he desperately tried to find a way to do so, because it had to be foolproof. By the following day, Jack had hatched a plan. He and his friends were to hide in the school toilets when the day's lessons were over, and he would go into the music room and spray one of the pianos with red paint. The can would then be planted in Colin's desk the following morning, because the head was bound to conduct a search of every desk in the school, and bingo! His arch enemy and his cronies would be well and truly framed, because Trout would suspect them anyway, as they were always trying to get into one of the practice rooms for a crafty smoke at break times, and were well known to him for hanging around that part of the school building. Jack started to smile as he added the cello to his planned misdemeanour. Just think of that, he thought. They might even get the police in, and that would do them some really serious damage. The following day the gang met again, and Jack told them about the plan. "We have to do it," he declared. "Nobody makes a monkey out of me, and they have. Payback time is coming." All the members of his gang agreed and shook hands. There was no going back now, for it had become a question of honour. The autumn term arrived quickly, and Jack, having already purchased a can of spray paint a few miles away from the area, set off for Culverdale High School for boys. He was feeling very pleased with himself, for he had thought of everything, including disguising himself at the time that he bought it. Nothing but nothing could go wrong with his carefully hatched plan now. Upon arrival, Collins and his gang sneered at Jack and his cronies, but they ignored them, much to the disappointment of Collins, who was spoiling for another fight. To retaliate would have given the game away, as they would guess that Jack and his gang were probably behind the misdemeanours they were about to be blamed for. Jack and the others made their final plans throughout the day, mainly during lessons using secret hand signs, much to the annoyance of the teachers. They eagerly awaited for the bell to ring, heralding the end of the school day at 3:50 p.m, and when it finally did, Jack and the others made their way to the toilets on the ground floor and hid in the cubicles. 10 minutes later, Jack, can of spray paint in hand, emerged from the toilets and quietly crept along the now deserted corridor in the direction of the music room. And upon arriving, the sound of Trout's jazz music boomed out from behind closed doors, and the smell of cigarette smoke filled the air. Jack had to act quickly and quietly, and he opened the door of practice room 1. He removed the cap from the spray paint, lifted up the piano keyboard and sprayed every key red. He then sprayed the cello, and removing his gloves he had worn to further cover his tracks, slipped back into the main foyer of the building, along another corridor and back to the toilets, giving a whistle upon arrival. The other 3 members then emerged from the cubicles, and they all crept silently out of the building, past the woodwork and metal workshops, passing the gym and the caretaker's house, and out of the school gates. The following morning Jack started out early. He met one of the gang members as usual, as they often took bacon sandwiches to school and shared them around 8 o'clock. This was usually followed by peering into the classroom to see if any teachers had also arrived early, and if they did, they made comments about them and had a good laugh, because they had given many of them nicknames, mostly derogatory. Jack and his friend were the first to wait outside the entrance by the vending machines that morning, and as soon as the doors were unlocked, he quickly made his way to the classroom of the tutor group of which Collins was a member. Opening Collins' desk, Jack planted a half-empty can of paint under some textbooks and quickly left the room. Jack then joined his own tutor group on the first floor of the building, where word had already got around about the previous night's incident. Collins had a bad name, and Jack was delighted to hear some of his classmates discussing the matter. "I reckon Barry Collins did it," uttered one. "He's hated old Trout ever since he boxed his ears. I'll bet it's him who did it." After registration, the bell rang for assembly, and as soon as the deputy head appeared on the stage, his face was like thunder. After the usual teachers had aired their praises and grumbles, Burbage took centre stage. "It appears that someone got into the music practice room 1 after school last night and sprayed the piano and cello with red paint," he bellowed. "This will not be tolerated, and the head has ordered a search of all desks as soon as this assembly is over, as he is determined to find out who was responsible. Bags will also be searched for any traces of paint, and those responsible will be thrashed before being suspended. Any boy who refuses to be searched will also receive 6 strokes of the cane. Do I make myself clear?" Jack and his cronies didn't bat an eyelid. Judgment Day for Collins and his gang had finally come, and they were delighted. Lessons were suspended for an hour after assembly in order to conduct the search, and Jack eagerly awaited the news that Collins had been caught red-handed with the can of paint. Several teachers went from classroom to classroom, searching every desk, briefcase and school bag, and Collins was caught red-handed. Frog marched to Burbage's office, as were others deemed to be guilty by association, according to Burbage, and underwent interrogation. They did not have a leg to stand on, as the evidence was clear, and Collins received 6 of the best and was immediately suspended from Culverdale High until further notice. Jack was over the moon because his plan had worked, and Collins was now laughing on the other side of his face. A month passed by, and Collins was permanently excluded from Culverdale High. He was sent to the infamous Broughton Street for boys, which was full of unruly pupils, and the head teacher had a reputation for discipline. Canings at assemblies were frequent, and any boy who stepped out of line received the full weight of the head teacher's wrath. Jack and his friends were delighted when they heard the news. 1-0 to us, declared Jack. Serves him right. Both gangs were therefore disbanded and went about their school days in the usual manner, laughing at the teacher's trousers, fiddling with the gas taps in the chemistry lab, and using Bunsen burners as flamethrowers. Things settled down, and Collins was soon forgotten. Jack was contented, having seen the back of his arch-enemy for good, but his life was about to change. For one lunchtime, a group of girls from Linden High School passed by the school gates where Jack and his friends were gathered. One of them smiled at him, and immediately spellbound, he smiled back at her. "Hiya," he said, and her friend started to giggle. She smiled again. "What's your name?" "I'm Susan Baker," she replied. "But you can call me Sue if you like." Jack began to blush. "Jack Harrison," he replied. "Hey, you were very pretty." "Come on," said one of his friends. "Let's leave Romeo and Juliet to it," and began to walk away. Meanwhile, the other girls, still giggling, continued on their way to school, leaving Jack and Sue alone. "There's a school disco next week," said Jack. "Sue, would you like to come?" "I might do, but then I might not," she replied. "I'll have to get back to school now, so wait and see." And with that she began to run down the road to catch up with her friends. That afternoon Jack couldn't concentrate at all, for he had Sue on his mind. His friends ribbed him as it went around the school that Jack Harrison had a girlfriend. "Inviting her to the school disco? He doesn't have many friends outside school," said one of his classmates. "It won't come to anything. You wait and see." That night Jack couldn't sleep. When he intermittently did, he dreamed of Sue and was sure it was love at first sight. The next day was a Saturday, and Jack made his way to the local common as usual, looking for local characters he could nickname. But his heart was not in it, so he returned home. As he did so, he passed the local ice cream parlour and heard a tap on the window. Startled, he saw Sue waving to him. She beckoned him inside. "Hiya, Jack," she said. "I'd like another Pepsi, but I don't have enough money." "I'll buy you one, Sue," he replied, and immediately purchased 2 bottles, returning to the table where she was sitting. "Sit down then," she said. "Hey, you're a bit shy, aren't you?" Jack blushed. "Not really, just with girls." "Don't be silly," she replied. "I hope you won't be like this at the disco next Friday, otherwise I won't come." Jack was over the moon. "You'll come then," he said. "Yes," she replied. "If you're there, then I will." They finished their drinks and Jack walked her to her front door. "See you next Friday then," said Jack. "You will," she replied, and kissed him on the cheek. Jack was amazed because he finally had a girlfriend, and what's more, he would really have something to brag about at school. Most of his classmates hung around with other boys, so that made him almost unique and certainly boosted his ego. Monday morning came and Jack returned to school, feeling like the cat who got the cream. He had to put up with further ribbing from his classmates, but he wasn't bothered. He had met Sue, and as far as he was concerned, that gave him some credibility. The school week continued, with Jack bragging about his girlfriend. "She kissed me on Saturday," he told his peers. "I bet a girl wouldn't kiss any of you. She really fancies me and she's very pretty." Unfortunately for Jack, most of the bragging took place during the history lesson, and Mr. Bullock, the history master, wasn't impressed as he realised Jack wasn't listening. "Who were the Queen's subjects?" "Harrison. Perhaps you could enlighten us," he said. Jack was startled and had no idea about what the teacher was saying and just looked at him blankly. One of his classmates, David Roberts, a mischievous lad who wore a blue jersey, leant over and whispered to Jack, "Duke of Edinburgh." "Duke of Edinburgh, sir," Jack replied, and the whole class erupted into laughter. "Harrison, you had better come and sit at the front of the class, so that you can take in the lesson," replied the teacher. Jack did so, and became the butt of Bullock's sarcasm for the rest of the afternoon, for the teacher was well known for it. Friday finally came, and Jack could not wait to see Sue again. The day dragged by. Many of his classmates couldn't even concentrate on their lessons, especially those in the lowest stream of the mathematics class, which is run by Mr. David Clifford Thomas, whose job it was to try and drum the subject into the most low-achieving pupils at Culverdale High. "I will read out a list of the boys who need to come and see me at 4 o'clock tonight for extra tuition," he declared. "Bates, Harrison, Jenner and Robertson, you will see me at 4 o'clock tonight because you need extra help with logarithms." "That's not fair, sir. The school disco is tonight," cried Jack. "Sit down, lad," replied the teacher. "You will come and see me at 4. The extra tuition was over by 4:45, so Jack hurried home and got ready for the disco. It was to be held at the youth centre adjoining the school, and after his evening meal, Jack set off for the evening, feeling very nervous about meeting Sue in front of many of his classmates. He arrived there at 7, casually dressed in sweater and jeans, but as he approached the entrance to the youth centre, he was aware of someone coming up behind him. Startled, he turned around to see Barry Collins with Sue, and they were holding hands. "Payback time, Harrison," taunted Collins. "She's mine, and she has been for the past 6 months. I set you up good and proper, didn't I? Yeah. I can't prove you were behind the vandalism, and I probably never will, but I'm going to damage your ego and you will never get over it." Sue giggled. "Surely you didn't think I would fancy a dead leg like you," she said to Jack. "You are pathetic, do you know that? And you were devious." "Come on, babe," said Collins. "There's a bad smell round here." They walked off, leaving Jack feeling extremely forlorn.